Good evening and welcome this evening to another edition of Angles and Attitudes. Tonight, we are honored to have the business leader and consultant and author of the book that we are really going to promote tonight out there called The Next Shift. And also, my guest has a podcast called The Next Shift. It's Judi Gilbert, and this is her book, The Next Shift, that we're going to talk about in the podcast tonight. Judi, good evening and welcome to the podcast. And I can't thank you enough for coming on Angles and Attitudes.
Well, and good evening, John, and thank you. I just am so grateful that you reached out to me, and I've been counting down the days because sport and obviously my new book are near and dear to my heart. And any chance that I get an opportunity to talk about hockey, I'm there. So I'm all yours. This is fabulous. Thank you.
This is great. I got to tell you, and of course, we'll tell our audience the other secret about you, which isn't a secret.
Behind me.
Yeah, right there. The secret. There's the answer. This would have been maybe we're going to date ourselves here, but it's the old Groucho Mark, you bet your life. The secret is out there. But you are the niece to the great Robert Marvin Hall, and you are the niece to Dennis Hall. And of course, I was going to ask you, they had a brother named Gary Hall.
Yes.
That was in training camp in 1969-70 in the Blackhawks training camp. I don't know if he went on to play professionally or not, but I thought he had a minor cup of coffee with the Blackhawks. But coming from this hockey background of yours, and I read about it, and I'm going to tell you the similarities between the two. You start to get noticed when you were about 11 years old?
Well, I started playing organized hockey when I was 11. So by the time I was 13, I had some multiple schools reaching out to start talking to me about their college and university programs. And again, back then, that was sort of the late 70s, early 80s. And there weren't not a lot of opportunities for women in hockey at that point. Things were just starting to gain a slight momentum. But it was an exciting time. And I mean, for me, I just wanted to play. And the fact that, schools were starting to chat with me a little bit, that was exciting. And that was my only avenue. I mean, and I played for the sheer love of the game. There wasn't the Olympics or World Championships to work towards. They didn't exist.
No, nothing like that. And I have to tell you, because when I read the book, you start at 11, but you start to get noticed a little bit when you're about 13 years old.
Yeah. You know what? And I've been playing on the backyard rinks, and we grew up on the Bay of Quinte, which is an expansive body of water that sort of feeds into the St. Lawrence and into Lake Ontario. And so I was always on my skates, and I think I think it's obvious that my love for the game does come partly because of my hereditary, the enthusiasts that came before me. And so in terms of my Uncle Robert and my Uncle Dennis, and I remember at a very young age, the only time I was able to stay up late was to watch the Hawks play the Leafs on Saturday night, hockey night in Canada. And
hockey night in Canada, yes. Was your mother and father, did your dad play a little hockey?
No, my dad didn't. So my mom is a sibling to Robert and Dennis. Funny enough, my mom, came from a family of 11 siblings, and my dad was an only child. And so, and he was, born in the late 20s. And so for him to have his daughter play hockey, this was something new for him. And it took a little convincing. And I think, in fairness to my dad, we played a winter sport and a summer sport.
Right.
But I wanted to play hockey. And I think, I talk about it in my book that I think when push came to shove, it was my mom that put him over the edge because, she grew up with hockey. And I think she knew how important that was for me. And ironically, my dad became my biggest fan, and he loved coming to the rink and enjoyed, whether it was my brother playing junior hockey or coming to see me. He just loved the game, but he never played hockey.
Okay, he never played, right?
Yeah.
Judi, I have to ask you, because like you said, when you started this tonight with me, back then, even for me, I was playing on the backyards. We were hoping that the pond was going to freeze in Illinois, where of
Yeah.
course, you guys, and I got to bring up this thing about the Bay of Quinte. Bobby has been interviewed, of course, so many times, and he tells the story that, he would skate around this bay and the family tried to catch him and they couldn't catch him. He goes, that's how
Probably.
fast he was then, but
Yes. Yeah.
there was a part here in the book that reminded me so much of my amateur career, because I was a goalie in a small town. And then I
Yes.
remember going to the university after I played the high school. And my mother, who couldn't speak English, one night told me, tomorrow you're going to a different level of the game. And I want you to know you are not going to be the star. Now, this is all told to me in Italian. My mother didn't know nothing about hockey. And I said to myself, she's out of her mind. What is she trying? She's trying to talk me out of this. When I went to that first tryout, in the book, you say about, anxiety and, can I be part of this? I mean, there were guys like there were 6'3", 6'4", and shooting pucks like Bobby and Dennis. I was like,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think it's time to become the travel agent, So, but take us through that, because you wind up going to one of I think the 4 top universities in Toronto, York.
Yeah, I ended up at York University. I'll never forget the first time I laced on my skates, and I talk about that in my book in terms of that anxiety and wanting so much to fit in, but wearing my white figure skates because payday had not arrived for my parents until the following week. And it was a sacrifice for our parents to put us in hockey. And I have a regret that I didn't realize that until later as a young adult or as an older teen. And their sacrifice was immense. And so that first week probably could have been my last, but I thought, you know what, put your skates on and just go and do what you love to do. And then the rest, as they say, is history. And I went on to play and loved the game. And we were very fortunate in our town of about 45,000 that we had a group of young gals that came together that were very, very competitive. And yes, and then I went on to play at York University in Toronto, and had an opportunity to play at U of T. And I had also been approached by a school in Canton, New York, St. Lawrence College.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but at that time, again, scholarships were minimum.
Few and far between.
And those were designated or saved for perhaps girls from the US. And my parents could not afford to send me as much as I wanted to go. It was just not going to happen. And so, I ended up at York and had some successful years there as well.
What, and here we're talking hockey. I was a goaltender. What position did you play? I forgot to ask you.
Oh, I was a centerman and a right winger for most of my career. It was really funny when I went to York. I joined the team a little bit later in the season. The coach said, Judi, you're going to play defense. And I'm just starting to steam inside. I'm thinking, I'm not a defenseman. I came here to be a forward. That's why I was recruited. But the coaching staff had changed from the time I had been recruited. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just bide my time. And I got an opportunity with the puck, and I took it and, was in on a scoring play, assisted on one, scored another. And coach came to me and said, you're now a forward. I said, that's what I thought it was going to be.
Oh my God. So yeah, they saw the ringer, or they saw already the little bit of the Hall gene.
I guess. But for me, I just wanted to compete, and I wanted to be the best that I could be and contribute to the game and to the team. And that's how I did it.
I love talking about the hockey part. As a woman back in that era, because now, we have the Kendall Coins of the world here out of Illinois and all that kind of stuff. Were you scared to play the game back in we're talking 70s, 80s, right? Late 70s. Yeah. Was it a scary time for a woman to play, or was like, you know what, I'm going to go in there with the chip on my shoulder?
No, you know what? I didn't know any of that. That wasn't really how it was presented to me.
Got
I
it.
think I grew up watching my uncles. Even though my brother was a little bit younger, I went to the rink to watch him play, and that's what I wanted to do. And so there were lots of people that said, maybe Judi should play on the boys team. And my parents said, "What? There's a girls team. She can play on the girls team." And I when I think about that, it was pretty insightful, because I know there were girls that went, long after me, there were girls that played on boys teams to find that more competitive play. But
Sure.
you know what? I was able to be competitive, and see success, and still have opportunities. And so I think that sort of helps that grassroots game when women support their own leagues. And that,
Sure.
I don't object to girls playing on the boys teams if that's what they choose to do. And our decision was that
Right.
it was never an issue. There was a girls team, and that's where I played. Now, we did play against my brother's rep team a few times just to have some games, but once we got to be about 16, the coaches decided that was enough. There was a big enough difference in size, and we were
Right.
all very competitive, that they said, "I think these games are over."
Did your uncles or even your brother, like, I know your brother didn't play, but did your uncles get involved when they would say, "Hey, are you playing this year?" When they had the time, of course, I know their season started September to usually April.
Yeah, and I think they were done hockey by the time I started. And so, those sort of,
Right.
no, when Uncle Robert, I guess he wasn't quite finished up.
He
'Cause I
wound
was
up going to the
72. I
WHA for
played
a
in,
couple cups of coffee in the early 80s. Yes. Can you hear me now?
yeah, so he went to the WHA in 72. Yeah, it's frozen up a little bit, but I think it's
I think we're
okay.
good now. Yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't start playing until 76.
Okay.
And so, yeah, they were still, sort of at the tail end. But really interesting that Uncle Robert had a home not too far from us on the Bay of Quinte. And so he would, it was about half an hour drive from Belleville.
They
And
were from
so-
Point Anne, the Halls, right? They were from Point Anne.
Yes.
And I looked that up. Is it true that, Judi, it's only about 11 minutes away?
Yeah, it's just down, it's 7 minutes from Belleville.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he would come into our games on our home nights, and he'd come and he'd have dinner at the house, and then, they'd head to the rink for the game. And so there was always a bit of a buzz when he would come, because he was retired at that point, and I was probably around 15, 16 at that time. And it was great. I mean, I didn't get to see him or Uncle Dennis growing up very much, other than a couple of times maybe in the summer. And so when they set down roots closer to home, it was really lovely. And I think that's really when our relationships, that we got to know each other that much better. And
sure.
They've always been very supportive and wonderful to me. And they've been very supportive of the book.
And I have to tell you, I'd like to move on a little bit. I mean, love the story about the hockey. And again, I always tell people at the end, I don't do it with everybody, but I have to tell you right now, midway here, we're going to have to do a part 2, because I'm enjoying this and I'm feeling a flow. So we're going to have to do a part 2, but I have to tell you, what you did and I did are basically the same, because I started my career a little bit late, 11 years old, and that was in 1971. And then I got to high school in the mid-70s, played on the high school team. You studied communications at York. I studied communications at a university here in Chicago,
I did.
Loyola.
I studied communications.
And was this now the turning point for you, now being this consultant, speaker, doing the next shift?
The next shift. And you know what? I think that's a really good point, John, is that I really started to think about the skills that I had developed. And I really believe my parents laid that foundation, and then sport gave me the opportunity to really hone those skills. And so, and I think I mentioned in the book that I was thinking that I would probably go into phys ed and teach. And then I ended up in this one communication course, and I was hooked. I was really hooked.
Wow.
And I think it's really the foundation of my business and my consulting business and being a leadership coach now. I think it's crucial that, young kids know how to communicate, and that, communication is not just about talking, it's about listening, and it's about learning about that conversation.
We have a leading journalist here in Chicago who's not a journalist anymore. He opened up his own communication company. And one of his slogans is something you just said: communications is no game. And I think it comes down to, like you said, you have to listen. I haven't finished the next shift yet. I have your marker. Thank you for the marker too. You've been very kind even to send a marker in there.
You're welcome.
But I have to tell you, in all the things that I've read so far, how the athlete, if it was the amateur athlete like me and you, or the professional athlete like Dennis, Bobby, and the people that you mentioned in there, Nick Foley, Jackie Jarrell, Joe Chinook, Randy Jens, they have prepared themselves for that next step, where a lot of athletes, and even just the common person, when something happens, I told my dad, oh no, I'm going to be Tony Esposito's backup for 15 years. My dad says, you must be out of your mind. You need to think about what you're going to do next, and take us through.
And that's really,
take us through that part. Yes.
Sorry, John, I didn't hear that.
No, I'm sorry. Take us through that part of, how you're, coaching and telling people to how to be prepared for this next step, especially after sport.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. The book is not just for athletes, it's for parents, it's for teachers, it's for coaches and mentors to start talking to these kids long before they're having to think about what their next shift is. And, and I think I talk about in the book about, it's wonderful if we're seeing success in our sport, but that's not going to last forever. And how do we identify the skills? How do we not compartmentalize? Because I know for me, and I knew there was nothing after university for me as far as, going on and to that next level with hockey, but I still had an identity crisis. I had always recognized and saw myself as a hockey player. And I think others saw me that way too. And so now all of a sudden I didn't have that. So who's Judi? And what does that look like? And so I think it's really important. And we work through each chapter with the reader to say, hey, start thinking about, what resonates with you. Did you develop resilience? Are you focused? Are you a good communicator? Because these are the things that, college and universities want to hear about, or potential employers, or if you want to be self-employed. And so if we can't speak knowledgeably about the skills we have, how is somebody else going to identify those skills in us?
Judi, like when I opened it up here with you tonight about the book, I really feel like you say something in the book that's really important. You say that, the sport of hockey really now I find myself in my business setting goals, doing what I have to do, be determined. And I really do believe, and now when I read this, of course, now I'm 62 years old and I had to wait for Judi Gilbert's book to understand all this, that yes, this is what it's all about. And I really do believe I got that. And I think I do believe that I got that as being this goaltender. I was focused. I was determined, and you bring this out in the book. Do you see that with others? Like I see the comments from Foley and Sens in the book that I'm going to go on, but do you see that with all the people that you come into contact with?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't want people to just take my word for it. And that's why I wanted to interview so many other athletes at different levels. There's a couple of Olympians, and I really believe that it doesn't matter what level of sport we play. We all achieve and have the opportunity to develop transferable skills. And so it doesn't matter if we're playing varsity or if we're an Olympian or if we're a professional. We have the same opportunities to start to develop some of those transferable skills that come from sport that we can use in our next shift. And really, that's how the chapters came to be, because when I was talking to each of these athletes, they started to repeat some of these things and identify some of these attributes and these competencies that they had developed and what they felt strongly about. And that's why it was really important that we hear from other athletes to get a really good cross section of not only different sports, but different levels. And I think that was really important. And that's what resonated with me.
Judi, do you find sometimes that, do you find that the athlete or the person that you're trying to motivate?
Frozen up there, John.
Okay. No, do you find the athlete or the person that you're talking to, do you find them to be like, no, Judi, I can't do this? Or do you, can you bring them back to that next step? Do you find that you've, accomplished this with some of them?
Well, and I think that, what's interesting is that whether it's a sport or a hobby or something else or a previous job, we all can acquire these transferable skills. And I've worked with some of my clients in terms of shifting from one career to another or one position in an organization to another. And so this really does apply to those folks as well. And that's the key, is to be able to identify those skills. And for an athlete, it's really important to be able to give really positive and strong examples of how they have acquired that skill. And so lots of times, many athletes don't have a lot of employment experience, but they experience on the ice or on the pitch or on the court. And so to be able to give examples of how they acquired that skill through sport, that's what employers want to see. And employers want to hire people that have been involved in sport and that have that work ethic. And not to say people who aren't in sport don't, but there's a bit of a given with people that come from sport, I think.
For sure. I want to read a thing that came out from, correct me on this if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Randy, is it Enns? Randy Enns? Ewens. He said, set goals for yourself. It doesn't matter if it's 6-month, a 3-year goal, set them and work toward them. I find that a lot of people don't set goals, Judi. They just sometimes figure, oh no, I can't do this. They don't go in there with, am I using the wrong word? They don't go in there with a plan.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I think goals can be scary, because when we have to hold ourselves accountable, then what if we don't achieve that?
Right.
And you know what? And it's okay if we don't reach our goal. We can review and say, hey, why didn't I reach my goal? Okay, well, some other things came up. I'm going to extend it. And I mean, that's what happened to me with my book. I had a date that I wanted my book to be done, and that date came and went. So I had to sort of have a conversation with myself, and I said, okay, why didn't I achieve that date? Okay, well, business started to come back from COVID, and, I needed to pay the bills and do my consulting.
Sure.
And, I had to be in the mindset to write. And so I thought, okay, just set a new date. And don't beat myself up about it. Just move forward.
I want to kind of feed off that.
Okay.
What did you always have in mind to write a book?
Do you know what? I have always loved to write. And over the last probably 5 to 7 years, I have been having conversations with myself about, when am I going to write a book? And it's been something I've been very passionate about. And I know 2 things. I'm passionate about sport, and I'm passionate about writing. And I'm passionate about, I guess, 3 things: knowing that sport gave each of us something. And for me, as I said, I think it gave me, and it gave me my values and my skill set. And so I wanted to be able to, put that into a book that could help other people. And so I've had an outline for my book for probably 4 or 5 years. And then I got to it about 2 years ago.
Right. I have to ask you, because, my son played hockey, of course, too, played at a little bit of a higher level than I did. He played at a college team here in Chicago called DePaul University.
Yes,
Played
of
on a
course.
lot of travel teams where he was on like a AA travel teams where
Yes.
I was maybe at a lower level. But what I loved about it, and I could see it now with him, and again, it goes back to the Judi Gilbert book, The Next Shift. Yes, he didn't make it to that next step level of, like say a junior team or something like that. But that controlled thing of 4 nights a week from those days, I knew where my son was. I knew where we were going. If we were going to
Absolutely.
Toronto, if we were going in a tournament in Illinois, we were going to Sarnia. This he's brought into his business world now, and I can see how dedicated again and how focused he is. And again, it feeds back to a lot of things that you say in the book. I was mentioning to him that when I'm done with this book, I'm going to give it to him, and I go, and I don't want one page curled up, but again, do you like, there's that athlete, of course, that gets the big contract. Let's say he's going to get like 10 million for a signing bonus. Now, I guess that might be minimal. And then of course the major injury comes. Do you run into a lot of those athletes that now, again, are not prepared after this, they blow out their Achilles tendon, but had a $10 million signing bonus?
Well, yeah, and they're out there. All right. And right. I think we all know that the game can end at any time. And so it's interesting that I'm just going to start doing a little bit of work with the NHL alumni and closer to the fall, and to be able to provide some insight around the book and identifying our transferable skills. And because when we think about the number of players that don't have that 15 or 18-year career, I mean, it's some of these guys, I think the average age in the NHL is like under 25, it's 23, 24, right, whatever that may be. Very young. And then the average number of years in the league is really low, which really surprised me when I found that out. And so, these guys coming out of that sport, and they don't have any work experience or minimal, right? They played hockey. And so they compartmentalize and think, well, I don't have any other skills. Well, yes, you do. And that's what I want people to understand, is that you have a plethora of skills here that are marketable. And you just have to be able to market them, communicate what they are, and speak knowledgeably about them to, as I said, potential employers, or going back to school, or in your network. Networking is huge for any of us, right?
Huge. Judi, do you find yourself, because I know you've written a book, you're a business leadership, do you find yourself, even at this stage of the game of your life, that you're doing more speaking?
That's the goal. I mean, I do some, I've always had to speak with any of the roles that I've had, even before I resurrected my consulting business a few years ago. The goal for me is to be able to speak more about these skills, and to be a keynote speaker per se, and that takes time, and obviously, but I really feel strongly that to speak to varsity teams or college sports teams, be it hockey, basketball, soccer, it doesn't matter the sport, and to be able to share the book and the lessons learned in that book, and to be able to share with them how to identify your own skills and start to think about those things. And so
I'm the skills in the job search. Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm going to be starting to do more speaking around the book.
Yeah. And of course, the book itself, I mean, I could see how you could get this off in the speaking end of it, because you really focus on a thing that's on the back of the book, which I love. You say, and we've been saying this all along in every piece of the interview that we're doing now, let's be honest, we are not athletes forever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a hard reality when it happens. And it happens because of injury. It happens when we age out of a sport. It happens when we graduate and we've been playing varsity, and so, or it happens when we're just can't compete at that level.
I have to tell you, I stumbled on you originally. I'll tell you how I stumbled on you, because I'm always looking to interview athletes or journalists or Judi Gilberts. Because this is just fascinating me. But I stumbled on your interview with Uncle Dennis. And I have to,
Yes.
that was a great interview with Uncle Dennis. And of
Thank you.
course, I knew that Dennis was this comedian for the NHL. He goes to a lot of these dinners, and even the interview with you, I mean, some of the stories he told, and he wrote the foreword in your book. I have to tell you, can you just elaborate on him, life after hockey? I feel he's been very successful. Am I wrong to say that?
He really has been successful, and he knew, when he left the game early, and by his choice. He wasn't obviously he had opportunities to continue to play, and at 33 he said enough. And
Right.
so to go back to school and to get his degree and to teach, has had an incredible post-hockey career. And obviously as a keynote speaker and comedian, he is one of a kind. But when I did those initial interviews, the next shift, that was long before the book. And really, that whole concept helped really bring into focus for me what the book needed to be about. And I knew I needed the book to be able to, one, to gain credibility and to be able to have something tangible. And so that interview with him, and I felt like it was just him and I sitting around, the dinner table type thing. And
but it was fantastic. I mean, it was, you really got the audience to listen, who's ever watched this video. I'm going to say, okay, what's this about? And then of course, the first thing when I hear that, you are his niece, but it was done so professionally, and the way he spoke about it, I said, wow, this is great. This is really great to hear about that athlete who now is doing something else, Yeah.
And he's always been extremely supportive, just as Uncle Robert is. And so whatever I'm into, if they can be a part of it, then they're happy to do that. And it was interesting because I had my book launch about a month ago here in Belleville, and they were both here, and they just signed books, signed and signed and signed. And it was just a real celebration. But yeah, when I look back on that interview with Uncle Dennis, I look back on it with very fondly, because it was easy, and he is just so great to talk to. And he's always very, he always wants to make sure people know, because I will not always bring up, I will introduce him at an event or do something, and he'll come up and say, okay, well, Judi didn't say it, but she's my niece. And so, and he made sure to do it in that interview as well.
And you know what, from an outsider looking in, for the first time, this is, your uncle, this is Judi Gilbert. You could see that Dennis Hall was genuine. This was not a pre-staged thing. No. He was genuine. And even, Bobby, I'm sure too. And by the way, I want to show the audience something that you touched my heart with. This was signed by Bobby. And of course, Judi. I like the Judi Gilbert signature will be worth more money in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And Dennis Hall, of course.
And Uncle Dennis.
This is from Judi. Of course, the book, The Next Shift. But yes, that triggered me. But again, I loved your interview with Foley, Jarrell, Chinook, and I think there was another, and Randy, of course.
Yes.
Have you done any more? I know I don't want to get off topic of the book, but have you done
that's
more
okay. I haven't, but I've done some other more just podcasts or around the book itself. And
I saw that.
Yeah, and then I've got I think 8 or 10 small snippets from where we take pieces from that initial interview and sort of advice from the book. And so the goal is that I want to continue on this path with the book. I think that when we put our heart and soul into something that we do feel passionate about, that I really want to give it the opportunity to grow and to get out to as many people as I can. And so I'm starting on this quest to contact sports organizations across the country. And so it seems daunting, and it is, but it's what I want to do.
I'm going to go back to something you just said maybe about 3 minutes ago. From those interviews with the dentists, the Foleys and everybody,
Yeah.
And Jarrell, was it then, because you had said you had done those interviews before you wrote the book, was it then when you says, okay, I got this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get myself out there? Was that your focus?
I think that was a big part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I wanted to write. I wanted to write about something, as I said, that I was passionate about. And this whole idea of these transferable skills and sharing my own stories of and then introducing these other players and sports people from different sports. Then I thought, this is it. This is so, I created an outline and then I got to it. And so, I mean, I think it probably was about a year and a half after that I started to put pen to paper and get going on the book.
Judi, how long did it take you how long does it take to do the book?
Well, I started it just after COVID. And so, as a business owner, and with, we all know what COVID did to so many people and businesses. And, my business came to a screeching halt,
Sure.
other than a couple of clients here and there. And about a month or two into COVID, after I had done every odd job around the house I could do,
Right.
I thought, if I don't write this book now, and if I don't start this book, I'm going to be pretty disappointed in myself. And so I started. I created the outline, and I had some folks that, some mentors that were kind of helping me along the way, and so that's how it came about. And so I knew that what that outline was going to be, and I started just writing down all of my personal stories about hockey and sort of recording those and recalling those things. So the whole process, it was about 16 months because there were days that I didn't write. COVID impacted all of us in different ways, and there were days where I just couldn't write. And then there was other days I wrote all day.
You were free flowing, right?
Yeah. And I guess that's what happens when you're writing. I mean, I didn't know because I'd never written anything like that
before, right? I have to tell you, I mean, I feel connected to you in this way because, again, we're playing hockey and we played hockey. We went for communications, and then talk about a business being impacted. I don't know whose business got impacted more. My family has had a travel agency for over 50 years in Chicago, and let alone that people are going on the internet more and more. When I tell you, Judi, I didn't do nothing for a year and a half, I didn't, but I kept myself motivated because people would say to me, I saw you at the office the other day. Well, I says, I'm not going to sit home and watch reruns of the Blackhawks or the Chicago Cubs. I have to find a way to make some kind of a living here, even if it's refunding or doing something. So I just feel connected to what you're thinking. There's something in the book that I want to, a little thing that I want to read just to get this out. And I want you to I tell you that I'm going to push this from my end, because already I was telling people tonight, they go, well, who's on the agenda tonight? And I go, it's Judi Gilbert. And of course I had to tell them about the book, The Next Shift. And of course about that Bobby and of course Dennis were your uncles. But there's something in here where you say, reputation should be based on integrity, good intentions, doing the right thing, being in control of our character, being accountable for our actions. Let's face it, we all make mistakes, but what is important is how we atone for these mistakes and how we take ownership of them. I mean, that gave me goosebumps just reading that, because again, you're focusing on the positive for this person to go to the next step.
Yeah. And I believe, anything I wrote in that book, I either lived it or I believe it, or they're the values that, that I sort of try and live my life by. We all make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. None of us are perfect. But I think it's how we self-reflect and how we do atone for those things. And that, if we've hurt somebody, whether it's intentionally or not, and hopefully it's unintentionally, that we say, hey, you know what? I need to go back to that person and say, I may have hurt your feelings, or did I say something to offend you? I think self-reflection is huge, and a lot of people don't do it.
Right. And I find, Judy, that what you just said to here now, that's the easiest thing to do. Like I says, I had an Italian mother that would tell me, John, and I was very shy when I was young. You would never get this much out of me when I was young. I'd be like 2 words. Hi, Judy. Bye, Judy. But I have to tell you, she would say to me, the easiest thing to do is to say hello. You know, if someone is interested in your conversation, but never be afraid, because we, like you said, we are all going to make a mistake, and we're all going to have to, you know, do something to correct that mistake.
That's right. That's right. And, you know, and again, it comes back to that foundation that my parents created. My self-worth did not come from playing hockey. My self-worth came from knowing what my parents felt about me and what they told me. It wasn't about me as a hockey player.
Right.
It was about being Bill and Jackie's daughter.
Exactly. Exactly. Very, very, very well put. Well, if you don't mind, I guess to learn more about you, if you don't mind me, I'm gonna say something to learn more about Judy and the work that she is so passionate about. Without a doubt, visit the website judygilbert.ca.
Correct.
And or the nextshift.org. I don't know how to thank you for the book. Really, this has been something that as soon as I got it, and I want to thank my brother-in-law for paying you for the book. Like, I gotta get this to Judi Gilbert. And Mike came through and flying cuts. But I just love the front of this, Judy, where it says, a guide to identify your core skills and successfully transition from sports.
Yeah.
This is a must read, everyone. The Next Shift by Judi Gilbert. Judy, I mean, I want to finish the book and get you back here in the fall.
I'd love to.
And then I want to find out, you're going to tell me in the fall that maybe you're a Pulitzer Prize winner. You know, that'll be next.
Well, I'll have an update for you at that point in terms of where we are with the book and what I've been doing. But John, I can't thank you enough. This has been absolutely delightful. And as I said, any chance I get to talk about the things that I'm passionate about and that somebody's interested in that, and a fellow hockey player, and in Chicago, no less.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I say stumble on you, I'm always looking, and you know, and I learned a lot from, because you can always learn from somebody else.
Yes,
in speaking and how you approach something. And like I said, when I saw your interview with Uncle Dennis, it wasn't about Uncle Dennis at the end. At the end, it was about Judi Gilbert.
Well, that's very lovely of you to say. And you know, they created their own identity, and you know, we were told we would always create our own as well. And I guess hockey just has played a huge part in me creating my identity, for sure.
And I got to tell you, to end it this way tonight, both of them, one in the forward and one, I think, where Bobby wrote something here in the beginning. I have to tell you, and I want to reiterate it, because sometimes with family, you don't hear it. They are very proud of you, young lady, because
thank you. Thank you,
I
John.
saw that from both uncles, and that again gives me goosebumps. I want to tell you, thank you. And I want you back on here in the fall. This is fantastic.
I would love it. And thank you, John. It has been absolutely terrific. And it was really lovely of you to reach out to me, and I'll look forward to our next meeting.
All right. Have a great evening. Is it cooler there than it is here? Because we're facing 95-degree temperatures.
Oh no, it's hot here.
Oh, it's hot. So it's hot everywhere. Yeah. I won't be coming there in the winter, but
hey, our winters are just like your winters.
Oh, I know. Sometimes those Chicago winds off Lake Michigan make it even worse.
That's right. Well, thank you, John.
Thank you. Good night, Judy. And
good night. Bye-bye.